Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sun hung low over the village of Green Hollow, casting long shadows across the valley. Aaron wiped the sweat from his brow as he hammered the last piece of metal into shape at the forge. His hands ached and his muscles burnt, but this was nothing new. The life of a blacksmith's apprentice was hard, but it was all Aaron had ever known. He swung the hammer again, watching the iron spark with each strike. The rhythm of the forge was the closest thing to peace he ever found. Still, there was always something in the back of his mind, something more, something calling to him beyond the mountains that framed the valley. At night, his dreams were filled with strange images, dragons soaring through the skies, wings spread wide, their scales gleaming in the sunlight. But when he woke, the dreams faded like morning mist, leaving him with only vague memories and a lingering sense of yearning. The village had its own pace, slow and predictable. The people were simple folk, living off the land, hunting, farming, and crafting. Aaron had been found as a baby on the edge of the woods, abandoned, or so they said. The blacksmith Hal had taken him in, raised him, and taught him the trade. Life wasn't easy, but Aaron never complained. There was no use in dreaming about things that would never be. As the final embers of the day dimmed, Aaron finished his work and stepped outside, letting the cool evening air wash over him. The stars were beginning to appear in the twilight sky, and for a moment, he allowed himself to wonder about the world beyond the valley. He'd heard stories from travelers, tales of great kingdoms, magical beasts, and powerful knights. But here in Green Hollow, those stories felt like nothing more than distant myth. He kicked at the dirt as he made his way to the edge of the village, toward a small hill where he often went to be alone. Tonight, though, something felt different. The air was thick, almost electric, and a strange pull tugged at his heart. He followed the sensation until he reached the top of the hill where the ground sloped down into a hidden cave he had never noticed before. Curiosity gnawed at him, and despite a slight sense of unease, Aaron made his way toward the cave. The entrance was narrow, just wide enough for him to squeeze through, but once inside, the space opened up into a large, dimly lit chamber. It was cold, the air heavy with the scent of earth and something else, something ancient. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes adjusted to the gloom, and then he saw it, a stone pedestal in the center of the chamber, and resting upon it, glowing faintly, was an egg. Aaron's heart raced. This was no ordinary egg. Its surface was smooth, but beneath the sheen, swirls of light moved, pulsing softly like the rhythm of a heartbeat. He approached it slowly, his instincts telling him to be cautious, but his curiosity urging him forward. When he reached out, his fingers barely brushed the surface, but the moment they did, a jolt of energy surged through him, forcing him to stagger back. The egg began to crack. A sharp line split down the middle, and Aaron watched in stunned silence as a tiny creature emerged. A baby dragon, its scales shimmered like liquid gold, and its wings, though small, stretched out as it wobbled on its leg. The dragoness eyes met Aaron's, and something deep within him stirred a connection, a bond he couldn't explain. The dragon blinked once, twice, and then nudged Aaron's hand with its snout as if seeking comfort. He knelt, breathless, and gently ran his hand along the dragon's neck. The creature let out a small purr, and Aaron couldn't help but smile. He had heard tales of dragons before, but seeing one in person, no, not just seeing it, but feeling the connection, was something else entirely. The legends of the dragon knights, long thought to be myths, rushed back into his mind. Could it be true? Could he have stumbled upon one of the last dragon-like? As the dragon curled up at his feet, Aaron's mind raced. He couldn't stay here, not now. People would come looking for him, and there was no telling what they might do if they found the dragon. His village feared anything they couldn't understand, and dragons had been gone from the world for centuries. He had to keep it hidden carefully. He gathered the dragon into his arms, its warmth seeping into him, and made his way back out of the cave. The stars overhead seemed brighter now, as if the universe itself was watching. Aaron felt different. Changed somehow, though he couldn't quite put it into words. The dragon stirred in his arms, and he smiled down at it. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered. "I promise." Over the next few days, Aaron did his best to hide the dragon. He named her Ember, after the way her golden scales glowed like the last flicker of a dying fire. She grew quickly, too quickly for comfort. Within a week, she was the size of a large dog, and Aaron knew it wouldn't be long before she'd outgrow the small shed behind the blacksmith's high shop where he was hiding her. It wasn't just Ember that was changing, though. Aaron felt it too. Ever since the moment he touched the egg, a strange power had been growing inside him. His reflexes were sharper, his mind clearer, and sometimes, late at night, he could hear Ember's thoughts as if they were his own. It was unnerving, but also exhilarating. He was no longer just a blacksmith's apprentice, he was something more, something ancient. But with that power came danger. It wasn't long before rumors began to spread. Strange things had been seen near the village, shadows moving where there shouldn't be shadows, figures cloaked in black. The air was thick with tension, and Aaron knew in his gut that the Dark Empire, long thought to be a distant threat, was much closer than anyone realized. One evening, just after sunset, an old man arrived at the village. He was tall, with a long gray beard and a cloak that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. His eyes, sharp and clear, settled on Aaron the moment they met in the village square. Aaron's stomach tightened. There was something about the man that felt familiar, though they had never met before. The man introduced himself as Thorin, a relic keeper of the old dragon knights, one of the last. He had sensed the awakening of the dragon egg and had come to find the one who hatched it. Thorin didn't mince words. The Dark Empire was rising, and they were searching for Aaron. They wanted him dead before he could fulfill his destiny. What destiny? Aaron asked, though deep down he already knew. Thorin's eyes gleamed with an intensity that made Aaron's skin prickle. You are the last dragon knight. Boy, you must revive the order or all will be lost. Aaron wanted to argue, to protest, but he couldn't. The weight of Thorin's words settled over him like a mantle. He had no choice but to bear. He wasn't ready. He had only just begun to understand his connection with Ember, and now he was being told that he had to save the world. I am just a blacksmith's apprentice, Aaron said, though even as he spoke the words, they felt hollow. Not anymore, Thorin said, placing a hand on Aaron's shoulder. The moment you touched that egg, your life changed. The world is counting on you, Aaron, whether you like it or not. Aaron swallowed hard. The weight of destiny pressed down on him, heavier than any sword or hammer he had ever lifted. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Thorin's grip tightened on his shoulder. You don't have a choice? That night, Aaron's dreams were filled with fire. He saw Ember grown to full size, her wings spread wide as she soared across a burning sky. Below her, armies clashed, knights on horseback, sorcerers casting spells, and at the heart of it all, a dark figure in a black cloak, his face hidden but his presence unmistakable. Aaron woke in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. He wasn't ready for this. But as he lay there, staring up at the ceiling, he felt a warmth by his side. Ember was there, her golden eyes glowing softly in the darkness. She nuzzled his hand, and he felt a surge of strength. Maybe he wasn't ready, maybe he never would be, but he wasn't alone. He had Ember, and now he had Thorin. And that was enough. Aaron sat at the edge of the small clearing where Thorin had set up camp. The crackling fire between them cast flickering shadows across Thorin's weathered face. Ember lay curled up beside Aaron, her scales catching the firelight like molten gold. The baby dragon had grown even more since they had left the village. She was now as tall as Aaron's chest, her wings still awkward but showing signs of their eventual power. Thorin's eyes studied the fire, but Aaron could feel his gaze flicking toward him from time to time. It made him uneasy. The old man had barely spoken since they left the village, but Aaron could sense the weight of his expectations hanging in the air. They were headed toward the old Dragon Knight training grounds, a place long thought to be lost to time, hidden in the mountains beyond the great forest. Thorin had said it was there that Aaron would learn the true power of the Dragon Knights, but Aaron wasn't sure how much more of this destiny he could handle. You need to clear your mind, boy, Thorin said, his voice breaking the silence. Fear clouds your judgment, and hesitation will get you killed. Aaron flinched at the bluntness of the words, but didn't argue. He knew Thorin was right. Every day since he'd found Ember, Aaron had felt like he was being pulled further and further into a world he didn't understand. There was no room for doubt anymore. but that did stop the questions from bubbling up inside him. What if I am not the one? Aaron finally asked, his voice low. What if I am not meant to be a dragon knight? Thorn didn't answer right away. He simply reached into the folds of his cloak and pulled out a small leather-bound book. Take this, he said, tossing it across the fire to Aaron. Aaron caught the book and turned it over in his hands. The leather was worn, the edges frayed from years of use. He opened it and saw that it was filled with strange symbols and ancient writing he couldn't decipher. It's the last of the Dragon Knight manuscripts, Thorn said. The final record of their teachings before the order fell. Inside are the lessons you need to understand, the knowledge that will guide you. Aaron thumbed through the pages, the weight of the book suddenly feeling much heavier than its physical form. He was holding a piece of history, a legacy he wasn't sure he could live up to, but there was no turning back now. He had to at least try. That night, Aaron dreamed again this time. It wasn't fire that filled his mind, but darkness, an oppressive, suffocating shadow that seemed to swallow everything around him. He could see the figures from his previous dreams, the armies and the knights, but they were blurred, lost in the blackness. And at the heart of it, the figure in the black cloak stood, his presence so overwhelming, it made Aaron's heart race with fear. You cannot stop me, the figure whispered. Though his lips never moved, your time has passed. The age of dragons is over. Aaron woke with a start, gasping for breath. His skin was clammy and his heart pounded in his chest. He looked around the camp, but nothing seemed amiss. Thorn was asleep by the fire and Ember lay beside him, her breathing calm and steady. But Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that the figure in his dreams was real, that he was somehow watching, waiting. They reached the mountains a few days later. The terrain grew rough, the air colder as they climbed higher. Thorn led the way with the ease of someone who had walked these paths 100 times before, but Aaron struggled to keep up. Ember, on the other hand, seemed invigorated by the change in altitude, her wings stretching more frequently as if she was preparing herself for flight. When they finally arrived at the old training grounds, Aaron was struck by the solemnity of the place. It was little more than a series of ancient stone ruins, the remains of a fortress carved into the mountainside. The air was thick with the weight of history, and Aaron could feel the echoes of those who had come before him, the dragon knights who had once trained here, who had fought and died for the realm. This is where you'll strain, Thorn said, his voice low, you and Ember. Aaron swallowed hard, feeling a sense of dread settle in his stomach. He didn't feel ready. How could he, when he had barely begun to understand his connection to Ember? But there was no time for hesitation now. Thorn led Aaron to an old courtyard where the remnants of a training arena still stood. The stones were cracked and weathered, but there was no mistaking the purpose of the place. This was where the Dragon Knights had once honed their skills, and now it was Aaron's turn. Begin, Thorn commanded, handing Aaron a sword that felt far too heavy in his hands. Fight. Aaron hesitated for a moment, then swung the sword clumsily at a wooden target. The weight of the blade threw him off balance, and he stumbled, nearly dropping it. Thorn watched with a grim expression, clearly unimpressed. Again, Thorn said, his tone sharp. Aaron gritted his teeth and tried again. The sword was heavy, awkward in his grip, and each strike felt more like a battle against the weapon itself than the target in front of him. He could feel the frustration building inside him, the doubts creeping in once more. Thorn saw a voice cut through the air like a whip. Stop thinking, feel Urine, not just swinging a sword. Boy, you rechanneling your bond with Ember. Let her strength flow through you. Aaron paused, his breath coming in short gasps. He closed his eyes, trying to focus, trying to find that connection with Ember that had been growing since the moment she hatched. He could feel her presence beside him, her steady breathing, her warmth. Slowly, he began to sense something else, a pulsing energy deep within him, something ancient and powerful. He opened his eyes and swung the sword again. This time, the blade moved with ease, cutting through the air with a grace and precision he hadn't felt before. The sword no longer felt heavy. It felt like an extension of himself, as natural as breathing. Thorn nodded in approval. Good. Now do it again. The training continued for days, each session pushing Aaron further than he thought possible. Thorn was a harsh teacher, unyielding in his expectations, but Aaron knew that he needed this. If he was going to face the Dark Empire, he had to be ready. There was no room for weakness. Ember, too, was growing stronger. Her wings had developed enough that she could now glide short distances. and her fire breath had become more controlled. The bond between her and Aaron deepened with each passing day, and Aaron found that he could now hear her thoughts more clearly, their minds connected in a way that felt almost instinctual. But even as Aaron grew stronger, the shadow of the Dark Empire loomed larger. Thorn had warned him that the Empire's forces were already moving, searching for the last of the Dragon Knight. They wanted Aaron dead before he could reach his full potential. And then, one night, the attack came. It started with a low rumble in the distance like thunder rolling across the mountain. Aaron woke to the sound of Ember growling, her eyes glowing fiercely in the darkness. He scrambled to his feet, reaching for the sword Thorn had given him. But before he could react, the first of the shadow creatures emerged from the tree line. They were grotesque, twisted figures, their bodies cloaked in darkness, their eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. Aaron's heart raced as he watched them move, their movements jerky and unnatural like marionettes pulled by invisible string. "Get ready," Thorn barked, his voice filled with urgency. "This is no training exercise." Aaron nodded, gripping his sword tightly. Ember snarled beside him, her body tense and ready for battle. The shadow creatures moved closer, their presence filling the air with a suffocating darkness that made it hard to breathe. And then, without warning, they attacked. The first creature lunged at Aaron, its claws slashing through the air. He barely managed to dodge, bringing his sword up just in time to deflect the blow. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through his arms, but he held his ground, pushing the creature back with a swift kick to its chest. Beside him, Ember let out a roar, her flames bursting from her mouth and engulfing one of the shadow creatures in a searing inferno. The creature screeched in agony before disintegrating into ash, but there were more, so many more. Aaron swung his sword again, this time with more confidence. He could feel Ember's strength flowing through him, their bond giving him the power and speed he needed to keep up with the onslaught. The shadow creatures were relentless, but Aaron and Ember fought with a ferocity they had never known before. But just as it seemed they were gaining the upper hand, a new figure appeared. She was tall, her dark robes billowing around her like smoke. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her presence sent a chill down Aaron's spine. He knew instantly who she was. Seraphine. She raised her hand, and the shadows seemed to bend to her will, forming into a blade of pure darkness. She smiled a cold, cruel smile as she stepped forward, her eyes locked on Aaron. "You cannot stop what's coming," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "The Dark Empire will rise, and you little knight will fall." Aaron gritted his teeth, tightening his grip on his sword. He wasn't going to let her win. Not now, not ever.